just realized that I am wrong. She is also wrong. So is he. We are just seriously wrong.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Seriously Wrong podcast. We are the Wrong Boys, Sean and Aaron, and today we're talking about
Justice. We're here to bring justice to all the people.
So last episode, we had a brief aside where we were talking about the structure of society and specifically like the current system of crime and punishment, the kind of justice system of our inherited society that we didn't design, but we are subjected to, treating people as irredeemable pieces of human shit, and how we think that is wrong. It's morally wrong for an institution to treat people as irredeemable, even if they have demonstrated through repeated behavior that they are a challenging subject for the institution, that they are not a rule-abiding citizen or what have you.
Yeah, morally wrong. I also think it's functionally not the best way to help people who have acted piece of shittily to not act that way in the future. I think it creates more piece of shit behavior to treat people like pieces of shit.
Yeah, and that was something that was like noted even by friend of the show, Peter Kropotkin, back in the day.
In olden times, yeah.
He went to jail and he called the jail something along the lines of like the nursery of crime. Like people are being treated so poorly here, and then they're also being given access to information that can help them to better commit crime in the future. And then, yeah, generally kind of prodding at the morals of like what are our intuitions around justice and what are our intuitions around what a utopian justice system should look like and be like.
Yeah, what is justice? It's a philosophical question. Greatest minds in the universe have tackled it, and now it's our turn.
Yeah. I mean, Rawls said justice is fairness. Plato thought that it was about like aligning the different elements or something like that, of putting reason ahead of appetite and spirit, I think. But yeah.
Justice as fairness works for me. Rawls also had that veil of ignorance thing, and like the idea like a just society would be like you don't know where you're going to end up in the society, so you want to make it so that it's good to be in any particular position.
Yeah, the veil of ignorance original position thing is it's a great thought experiment. It really is. Like when you're thinking about a fair society, is imagine a society where you're going to spawn randomly in one of the roles of this society. So a just society is one where you'd be happy to be spawned basically in any role.
Right.
He didn't use those terms, spawning.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. But yeah, like that is just getting at fairness or like what's right. Like a just situation is a situation where nobody's being treated wrongly. Nobody's being treated poorly.
Yeah, it's also a collective thing too. It's like individual justice is about doing right by everyone and doing right by everyone collectively as well. Like intuitively anyway, this is what justice feels like to me. Is like it's got to be for the benefit of everyone involved, with an asterisk, in that justice sometimes can disadvantage someone who has to make amends or has done wrong, etc. So I think it is more about the group, isn't it? Like, and it's connected to experience too. Like there's feelings of justice and injustice. Justice is like a structure of collective fairness. It's also something that's really felt in your body. Like I really believe in justice. Like you could talk about fairness and like, of course I support fairness, but like you get me thinking and feeling about justice. It's like another level of like justice is like, there's also like this implicit sort of transcendence to it of like justice is what's right by everyone, but it's also could be what's right by everything. Like what's right by nature, what's right by the world, what's right by future generations. Like this is all tied up in my feelings of justice.
Yeah, I was gonna say it feels like right and wrong, like political right and wrong. It's interesting though, like I rarely think about justice in the way that I think it's often thought about in terms of like the criminal justice system and like getting back at people for doing something wrong, or like balancing the scale. I do like the balancing the scales metaphor. It's like it gets to fairness again.
Yeah.
But like
and Lady Justice, the image of the blindfolded sword holding woman with the scales is beautiful iconography of justice. You know, the sword is the swift judgment. The
sword is my least favorite part. I do love the blindfold and the scales. The sword, like, sure, I'm not saying sword's always bad, but
it's a proletarian sword. It's on behalf of the people.
Ideally, yeah. Though I don't
I'm
know
saying in the good version, at least.
Yeah, totally. But the
blindfold
way it's
and the scales, it's like there's a really potent metaphor there.
Yeah. But I think the way that it gets interpreted, or a lot of the criminal justice system version of it, is like, oh, you did something bad, that puts a weight on the scale, so we have to do something bad back to you to balance the scale again. Like, it creates a synonymous justice with punishment thing. And like, punishments maybe arguably can be part of justice, but the idea that that's like the whole thing is really narrow.
Yeah, especially because, I mean, like, so much of the root causes of antisocial behavior are just, like, so obvious and plain, like poverty, systemic cycles of violence, etc., deprivation. Like, if someone steals a piece of bread because they're hungry and then you, like, harm them again, that's unjust. That's an unjust justice system when you're doing something like that. And that's the type of justice system that I think that we have come alive in, that we were born into.
But yeah, I mean, this episode, we're going to talk about what we think about justice. We're going to focus a lot on like the criminal justice system and what a better version of that would look like. Obviously, it's a huge topic, and we're not going to be able to cover every detail of every idea here. But, you know, let's get thinking a little bit about what would a utopian justice system look like?
Yeah. No, it's more interesting to talk about it anyways. Like, consult an encyclopedia if you want all the details.
Yeah, I mean, read every book on the topic, become a scholar of the concept of justice, and just think about it broadly and write essays and do PhD thesis on it. That's all available potentially.
If you're doing that, you should actually thank us for not pre-baking too many ideas in for you by getting too detailed with all this stuff.
Yeah, if we just...
If we'd done a 7-hour episode on justice.
If we did a 7-hour episode, we'd be undermining so many PhD theses of people whose lifetime work
future scholars of justice who they needed to be inspired, but they didn't want to be spoken down to or controlled. Today's episode of Seriously Wrong is brought to you by...
Oh no, that criminal's getting away with my purse! Help me, Captain Justice!
Captain Justice is here to give crime a beating. Ah!
My baby!
Punishment comes first. I'll grab this load-bearing pillar. Ah!
My purse! You saved it!
It looks like this scrawny little weakling won't be stealing any purses anytime soon, unless he can pick up the pieces of his skull and brains from the pavement.
Captain Justice, don't you think that it's counterproductive to cause this much damage? I mean, look, you collapsed an entire bridge and multiple cars burst into flames. It was like a giant bomb went off with that explosion, and it seems like a lot for a purse, kind of causing more harm than good.
Are you suggesting that I should be soft on crime?
But, well, no, not necessarily. I didn't mean soft, but maybe still firm, but more of a medium firmness.
Captain Justice 4. Mandatory minimum full retribution. Coming soon to theaters.
We had a chance to connect with people who just saw Captain Justice 4, Mandatory Minimum Full Retribution, outside the theater, and this is what people are saying.
That was awesome. I love how masculine he is, how traditional he is. I love his contempt for the weak. And his slogan, punishment comes first, I use that all the time with my kids. This is the best one yet. I hope this franchise goes on for decades, centuries even.
I like how he's judge, jury, and executioner. You're saving so much money there. It's like a 2-in-1 shampoo.
I really loved seeing the beatings and the morale improving in society. And, you know, I just hope that in installments to come that the beatings continue.
I'm a huge fan of the comics, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing all of the discipline team come together like a bundle of sticks to eradicate, basically,
The undesirables.
yeah.
It's time for Lady Justice to take that blindfold off and use that sword for once.
My daughter, she's 5 years old. She loves Lady Justice. She's always putting on the blindfold and swinging the sword around the house at her little brother for everything he does wrong. Makes you proud as a father. Pretty much the whole time we've been doing the show, there's been public discourses around punitive justice versus restorative justice or rehabilitative justice. And this kind of like notion of punitive justice is like you punish someone because they're bad, and it's like satisfying to someone who is wronged or even as a bystander in a Schadenfreudian kind of way.
Yeah, I think also the theory is that like you do something bad and something bad happens to you, and in a kind of like behaviorist responding to incentives thing, you no longer want to do the bad thing because you don't want the bad thing to happen to you again, which I think, yeah, works in some cases. It's
Yeah, like you're not going to repeatedly touch a hot stove.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
hard-coded into
totally.
our psychology. But there's limits of that kind of logic when you start bringing in agents, I think. The perception that you're being punished by a person might make you resent that person more than it makes you want to avoid being punished by that person.
Yeah, or you can try and avoid being punished by that person by avoiding being caught rather than avoiding doing the thing. Like touching a hot stove and burning it, there's no like, oh, if I touch the hot stove in secret, it won't burn me. It'll just be fine. That's not how it works in that case. In that case, no matter how many people are watching you or anything, if the stove is hot and you touch it, you'll be burned. So there's that extra layer of like, you can avoid punishment in more than one way than just not doing the thing that people get punished for. You can avoid it by not getting caught, by being sneaky.
Yeah, and a lot of crimes, especially like theft, but even to a lesser degree, like the exercise of like social power, intimidation, violence, etc. People are trying to meet some need through this behavior that's being called criminal, this antisocial behavior. So there's like a different incentive. Yeah, there's multiple incentives. Like I'm trying to avoid punishment, but I am still trying to meet this need, whether that's to steal a piece of bread or even to make this need of feeling like an important person by getting some pocket change and feeling big and important by robbing someone or whatever,
Right.
at knife point or whatever, imaginary antisocial behavior. Like people are getting things from these behaviors that are being deemed criminal. They may try to walk that narrow path of getting what they want, stealing that loaf of bread without getting caught. So it's not exactly analogous to the stove touching scenario where you're not getting anything from it.
Yeah, I guess there's no real reward for touching a stove that I can think of.
Yeah, like maybe reaching into a fire to get a hot potato type thing, and then you're trying to like that's, but then you're not going to be like, oh, I don't want to eat anymore. It's too hot to want to eat. You're going to work out strategies of how can I get the potato without being burned, which is the same as stealing from a grocery store. How am I going to get the potatoes without getting burned by security?
Right.
Unless you make a society where there are potatoes nearby that you don't have to be burned to in order to eat. So that need can be met outside of the bounds of this criminal space.
Yeah, I think the narrowness of the focus of the current justice system is kind of one of the issues with it. When I think about a utopian justice system, it's got to be more holistic than just trying to punish people to, at least in theory, to ensure they don't do it again. That's like a very reactive way of dealing with the question of how to create a more just society. I don't even think the current justice system would be framed as how to create a more just society. It's more like how to provide justice for wrongs that have been committed, not how to holistically nurture society in such a way to as maximize justice, which I think is a system that would need to start actually before crimes happen, before negative things happen, before someone is hurt or hurts someone else.
An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say.
Yes, exactly. And like, yeah, the current criminal justice system just isn't set up to deal with prevention that much. There's talk of it. And like we have other legal systems that in theory you can pass laws that can help with prevention and things like that, more outside the justice system. But yeah, when I think of a utopian justice system, it's got to be more encompassing.
Yeah, it's really a beautiful idea. Like you think of something like the Department of Justice exists as part of states, and
Right.
it's like a place for courts, lawyers, interpretations of these legal frameworks, and people being harmed and then other people going to jail over it. Imagining a Department of Justice that is focused on issues of economic, social, ecological justice, that's focused on redressing past wrongs and building a society that is a just, equitable, ecological society. That's a utopian dream worth chasing.
And they're connected too. Like I think like there's a common perception that they wouldn't be connected, that like there are people who are bad, they're pieces of shit, they're irredeemable, and that quality within themselves causes them to act out in bad piece of shit ways. And the only thing you can really do is punish them to try and force them to, be more avoidant of those negative outcomes than they are of doing the bad behavior. But a more holistic view on justice sees that like most crimes are rooted in the conditions of the society that the person exists in beforehand. Like some of them just like functionally so. Like you're not going to steal food if you have access to all the food that you could want. Like, people only need so many calories. And people have preferences for like variety and like which kinds of food they're eating. But in theory, if you could access any food you want, nobody's going to steal food. It's just like by definition, it wouldn't make any sense to. It would be impossible to because it's just available to you.
Yeah, I think it's definitely there's a variety of determinants to have people turn to like antisocial behavior, which is currently classified as crime, whether to make money or to meet their basic needs, etc. But it's definitely the case that if society is an abundant place where people's needs are met, then the frequency of such antisocial behavior is going to shrink. Having a kind of justice department, a social justice department that's fixated on ensuring that people's basic needs are met. They have access to what they need. They have access to opportunities. They have access to do the things that they want to do in a fair and equitable way. They're not deprived. There isn't the resentment of inequality and so on. I think you're going to see a lot of improvements on these behaviors. Like I'm hesitant to use like this broad term crime of like getting rid of crime or something like that. It's just like there's something kind of like icky about it to me because there's like two categories of crime. There's like real antisocial harmful stuff, which is we currently use the framework of crime to think about. And then there's stuff that's criminalized, but there's no reasonable, it's just not nearly the same. Assaulting someone, harming someone's bodily integrity is a genuine antisocial act. But disobeying some sort of arbitrary rule or something like that, or a great example is ingesting cannabis or alcohol in a jurisdiction where that's illegal. That's not like a crime. That's not something you need to like. The utopian framework for how to reduce that type of crime is to remove it from the framework of criminality.
Right. Crime is like a weird category, but yeah, there's things that shouldn't be crimes that are considered crimes. There's things that probably should be considered crimes that you could get around functionally by providing people with what they need. And then there are things that mostly like in the area of like violent crimes, I think is like a different sort of, yeah, it depends on the motivations behind them. But
yeah, I mean, there's certain violations of like bodily integrity, whether that's physical assault or sexual assault. It could even be like a psychological violation of one's integrity that I feel is like a very severe social crime. It's like a cruel way to treat other people. And it's like goes against some basic boundaries that we set up for good reason about how people should be treating each other. And like, I don't think the total impetus to do that would be injustice, deprivation, and so on. Like some amount of that is going to persist no matter what the context, like when we're talking about the preventative context of stopping crime by removing things that shouldn't be crimes from the law books and making sure that the determinants of need that pushes people to crime, whether that's to make money or feed yourself, etc., that's minimized by having an abundant, giving, caring society. There's still left over. One of the things that's left over is like fucking people over, violating their bodily integrity and so on. And I don't think, although I wish maybe that it would just go away, I don't think that creating like a utopian abundance framework is going to prevent that from ever happening. So I think also in a utopian justice system, it's not enough to say, oh, we're going to make everything so nice, everyone's going to stop doing all sorts of crime. We have to also figure out what is a just way for an institutional society, a democratic, ecological, and egalitarian society to respond to those incidents of antisocial behavior when they arise in various forms. And whether that's physical battery, sexual assault, and so on, we have to accept that this is going to happen to some degree, no matter how much bread you make free.
Yeah, making bread free, I think, could help with that a little bit. I think like society-wide interventions that would be more to the point there would be having to do with like strong communities, having people enmeshed in social nets where their emotional needs are met, education initiatives, dealing with institutional biases and oppression like misogynistic sexism, I think is like a huge part of a lot of violence in our society. Like there's a lot of violence from men against women that is rooted in misogyny that I think tackling that kind of thing on a society-wide level can have positive effects. I think having support systems, mental health support systems, having broad socially flourishing societies can move the needle on some of these things. But I don't think anything is ever going to be perfect in that regard. And I don't even know, even if it was perfect, if you're never going to have outliers who just have whatever their issues are, whether it's something like in their brain or the way that they respond to society, or like they have some deep malevolent impulse inside them. You know, I can't like rule that out. I don't know every person, what's deep inside. So like, yeah, a utopian justice system can't just assume that prevention is going to take care of everything. It has to also respond to crisis moments.
Yeah, another reason that we really need to think about those response to crisis moments is that like as we transition from an unjust justice system to a just justice system, there's like all this intermediary time where we're going to be dealing with the hangover of people coming in from a society with deprivation,
yeah, even if theoretically you can create this perfectly designed society where nobody ever has the desire to do anything wrong ever again.
Yeah, no one's ever going to slap someone's ass without their permission ever again in history because there's so much bread.
There's so much bread. There's so much education. Everybody's so emotionally intelligent and aware of their own needs and desires that they both are able to set boundaries with others, and everybody else is so respectful of those boundaries that they would never cross them.
Yeah. Actually, this is the first, when you were talking there, it was the first time I felt like, yeah, that probably is possible. Like education and stuff. But anyways, we should act as if we should be prepared to address.
It's a long ways away if it is possible. So.
And it would be great to have mechanisms for dealing with things like assault that are on the books that never have to be used again in all of human history. Like that's a great goal.
Yeah.
But you still want to...
If it withers away because it hasn't been used in 500 years, then fine. But
yeah. Papa and boy.
Boy, come in here, boy.
What is it, Papa?
I need you to sit down. It's time we had the talk. The talk about justice.
Oh, justice?
Yes.
I love justice, Papa. Like Rawls' original position, veil of ignorance thought experiment is incredible. You know, I was a lot more into restorative justice now, but now I think I'm more leaning towards transformative justice, like not just looking at the root causes, but actively transforming the root causes. You know, addressing harm without doing more harm.
Boy.
Transcending a punitive framework.
I'm talking about like catching bad guys, right? Like apprehending criminals to keep the streets safe and ensure public order. So you got like a cop, right? And he's a kind of a total badass, and he's got guns strapped to him, and he goes out there, and he's on the prowl. He's looking, where are criminals? I see a criminal there. Pull the gun. Hey, you stop, bad guy. Get in my police car. That's what I'm talking about. Keeping people safe, right? So I don't know. You just said a whole bunch of things, and it sounded like gobbledygook to me.
Yeah, well, I want social, economic, ecological justice, racial justice, gender justice. And I want to take a look at crime and punishment through a critical criminology lens, you know, and maybe a little bit of a left realist lens. I'm talking Marxist, anarchist criminology, you know? I'm talking about stuff like the social determinants of crime, you know? I'm talking about rehabilitation, restorative justice, but also transforming society. And I mean, indigenous justice, decolonial justice. So indigenous justice and learning from indigenous lifeways, you know, pre-colonial modes of justice and bringing that into our practice, but also decolonial justice in the sense of remedying the wrongs of the colonial period, which was relatively recent and actually had a major impact on our current society.
I feel like you're kind of missing the point, which is that
Oh, I'm sorry.
there are some guys who are bad.
Right.
They're bad guys and they're out there. And they're making law-abiding citizens like you and me fear for our safety. So we can't even start businesses. And basically, we need armed protection to keep the world safe for capitalism.
Right. Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that. I think the punitive structure of threat and intimidation is counterproductive sometimes. It's also very expensive. And he's responding to harm with more harm.
Well, that's all you can do sometimes. When you really understand the criminal mind, I don't know if you've ever seen like Mindhunter or the Hannibal Lecter movies or like Criminal Minds.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen any of those.
If you watch them, you come to understand that some people are just think they're different than you and me. And the best thing we can do is throw them in a cage, the worst cage possible, with a whole bunch of other people like them, and hope that they get raped and laugh when they do. And that's justice.
Yeah, Dad,
Because it's funny, right? Because they did something wrong, and there's like a lot of sexual assault in prison, and it's really funny.
that's insanely fucked up, Dad. Doesn't seem like that's even how to deal with crime, if that's your concern.
I
Do the
feel like
rapists
you're not
get
getting
punished?
Well, yeah, they're in jail already, and we can add more years on probably. I think the thing you're not understanding is they're bad, like bad guys, right? This isn't happening to good guys. You're reacting as if I said this should happen to good guys,
Right.
but they're bad guys.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Dad. You're giving me a lot to think about.
That's my boy. You get it.
Do you want to go watch sports or play a video game that takes place in the military with me?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, let's go shoot some bad guys in video game land.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it, Dad. Papa and boy. I heard this transformative justice advocate say, transformative justice, in the simplest terms, it's about responding to harm in ways that don't create more harm. And I think that's a really beautiful, easy, quick way to frame an
I think
ideal.
it's an operating principle that you can kind of measure an ideal justice system against.
Yeah, but it's clear that like our justice system here in Canada, from what I hear of what's going on in the U.S. and many other places.
I've heard a few things about
Yeah,
that.
I've never interacted with the U.S. justice system. Yeah, harm is responded to with more harm in a multitude of ways. And people who have harmed others are harmed further by the justice system, but there's also ways that people who are harmed themselves are harmed further by the justice system. Like, for example, if you're the victim of petty theft, your laptop and your bicycle stolen by someone, you talk to the police about it, the whole thing is a demeaning, humiliating, fruitless affair, which is itself harmful to you as a victim of something that's a genuine antisocial behavior, which is the loss of something that you rely on, like a laptop. Sure, it's only worth $500, $700, or whatever it is. But there's a good chance that has some of the truest reflections of your soul that you own on it. Your correspondence and documents where you write your ideas or whatever it is that you do, art that you do, etc. Stuff that's not backed up anywhere. And I've never known of like that kind of the sentimental value of things and stuff isn't really reflected in the justice system as it currently exists here. Like, I don't think cops would give half a shit if my $200 Chromebook has my only copy of my screenplay on it or not. But that's the most profound thing in the world to a screenwriter.
Yeah, that's interesting because like the criminal justice system, even if cops did give a shit about that, they're like completely incapable of helping you with it, except in the rare case that they might actually be able to catch the person who got your laptop and it hasn't been wiped and they can get it back to you. But there's like so many ifs there. Like the criminal justice system is completely incapable of helping you with that. The only besides providing everybody with laptops, the only other just solution to that I can think of is maybe providing everybody with free cloud backups for all your information, like to make sure that nobody ever loses data again. We've just provided everybody with unlimited free. I mean, like, there could be environmental justice concerns with that, but yeah, it's just got me thinking, like, what would the actual just solution to that be? How could you prevent that?
Yeah, another thing too, if like you're reporting something missing to the police, like my bike is stolen, they're going to be like, what's the serial number? And then you're like, I didn't record or write down the serial number anywhere. And they're like, you fucking dumbass. You piece of, well, now it's hopeless. Give up. I'm not really going to say that to you, but that's the implicit. I don't know about you. I've never written down the serial numbers of anything that I've ever owned, maybe with the exception of one bicycle right after my bike was stolen, which then I promptly lost.
Occasionally, I will have a picture that might be buried in a phone somewhere of like, and more because I need to fill something out and it was like inconvenient to both look at the model serial number on the bottom of the laptop and type on the laptop at the same time. So you take a picture of it on your phone and then it might be buried. If I go back, I might be able to find it. Maybe.
That's how I store my Wi-Fi password sometimes, just a picture of a router somewhere buried on my phone.
Yeah, buried.
Yeah, so the justice system harms people who are already harmed. Like one of the big examples of this is what's called sometimes the second rape, when people who are victims of rape, women usually, go to the police to report what happened to them, and then they're questioned and interrogated in a way that violates their integrity all over again, which makes reporting incidents like that harder to do and so on.
Yeah, and on the off chance it goes to court, you got to do it again under the prosecution or the defense attorney's questioning potentially.
Yeah, so someone who's going to be hostile to you and try to make the case to a group of strangers that you're lying and that you're somehow being duplicit. Like, yeah, that's horrible under the most normal conditions. But to do that compounding with being a victim of a sexual crime, that is disgusting. Like, that is fucking horrible. So yeah, there's issues with the current justice system, and not just perpetuating harm or like cycles of harm, but also sometimes inflicting harm randomly in a way that makes no sense. And it's also kind of like, it's all baked in. There's like this implicit idea with a lot of like standard, the justice framework that we grow up with, which is like, if you do bad, you're punished. If you talk too much, you got to go in timeout. You know, if you're not listening, then we're going to take away the movies that you like or whatever it is. Like this punitive framework is so threaded through our whole lives. So it just makes sense that it takes a little bit of cognitive work to think of what an alternative would be.
Bad boys, what you want, what you gonna do? What you gonna do when they come for you?
Open up. This is the Chalif department.
We got a report of a robbery here at this location, ma'am.
Oh, thank God you're here. Oh, the Chalif. Well, earlier today, my purse was stolen. It had $235 in it. I was going to use it to get my hair done.
Man, we're so sorry to hear that.
That's horrible. You need a haircut really badly. Your diet, so much of your roots are showing. That's not right. And worse still, there's something of sentimental value in there, too. My only copy of my picture of Pupsy, my little dog, who is unfortunately run over by a tractor.
Oh my, it's so difficult to lose a pet. I know what that's like, ma'am. And your only picture of him? That's
not justice.
In no just society would we rest until you have that picture back. Can you tell us anything else about the suspect? Did you see what they look like?
Yes, his name is Damon Thomas. He lives just down the street. I've known him for years. He's going through some sort of tough time right now. But
Perfect.
He took my purse. He yanked it from my hand. He took my $235 and my sweet picture of Pupsy, the tractor killed dog. That's tough, losing a picture of your precious, beloved late dog.
Here, let's enter this on the computer here in the car.
Let's see.
Let's get to the root of this crime here.
Yeah, what would be the root cause of something like this?
Let's check the funding and the school systems around here.
Here we go. Yeah, no, that's right. He went to Sir Thomas Elementary.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Habitually underfunded by
Budget
a series of cuts.
Again. Yeah.
So let's see. Just open up my panel here, and I'll just increase the funding to that school. Click, click. So that should help in the future. Make sure that there's
prevent
enough
this kind of thing from happening again.
Not just support for the staff, but also support for the supplemental staff. And know what? Hey, let's give them a new play structure. There we go. For the next generation. Hey, open up. This is the Chalif department. We know you're in there, Damon.
We're just here to talk. Hello?
Hey, Damon, we got a report of you yanking a nice older lady's bag from her earlier today and stealing $235.
Oh, yeah. I did do that. I got these kids, and I didn't have enough money to buy groceries. I really needed the purse. You guys get it.
You got the purse? You give it back to us?
Yeah, here, let me find that. Here it is. Here's the
One
purse.
second. You know there's precious sentimental memories in this purse, eh?
Oh, there it is. There's Pupsy.
Pupsy. That's the picture. That's the pup. But I gotta say, Damon, it was very rude and selfish of you to take this purse.
Yeah, I know. I've been trying to launch this small business recently to help feed my kids, but it's so hard to get a small business loan.
Here, let's see what we can do. One sec. I just open up the panel here, and
Yeah,
I
he
think-
did wrong, but he does make a good point about how difficult it can be to feed your kids.
Okay, Damon, here's the deal. You give us this purse back. We're gonna want you to get down there and apologize to her for sure.
Yeah, say sorry and mean it.
Yeah, mean it.
We don't want no, I'm sorry you felt bad about what I did.
Yeah, or
kind
like
of
that kind
apology.
of sorry. Anything like that is not going to be okay for this.
Yeah, no.
And we will come back if we hear anything like that. Secondly, we're going to be giving you a interest-free small business loan of $25,000. It is potentially forgivable as well if your business doesn't take off. But the only condition is that your first $235 of profit must go to that nice woman.
We really want to see you succeed. We want to see your kids fed, but we can't have you robbing innocent people at
Ever
knife point.
again.
Yeah.
Not even once more time. Okay?
Yeah, that sounds fair. Thank you for this carriage of justice. I feel like justice has been served today. I don't know why I did it. I just sometimes have these emotional impulses, and I don't know. It's probably...
Damon, go on.
I just get scared that I'm not good enough sometimes. You know, I feel like a real piece of shit inside because if I don't have enough to care for my kids, and my dad always used to call me that, a piece of shit, you know, and it's... I don't know, it's stupid. I shouldn't even be bringing this up, but...
Your dad used to call you a piece of shit when you were a child?
Yeah, he was going through stuff too, and like, you know, he never apologized for it, and...
Well, I gotta say, Damon, that's not right. That's not right at all.
Yeah, it's
That's
a miscarriage of justice.
That's no way to talk to a child. Thank you so much for giving us this information so we can continue our case. Chalif, open up!
Is this Roger, Damon's father?
Go away!
Sorry, sir.
We're the Chalif department, sir. You gotta come talk to us.
We're not here to bug you, but this is important Chalif business.
It's about your son, sir. Stupid fucking son sent you here? How'd he fuck up this time?
Well, he didn't send us, sir, but we did receive information, we can't tell you from where, that you used to call your son a piece of shit when he was a child.
And he's not stupid, sir. He's a very nice man. He just made one mistake. Yeah, maybe I called him a piece of shit a few times. He is a little shit.
Well, we've received information indicating that harsh judgment of your son as a child has stayed with him for his entire life, and it's actually having repercussions today. And, you know,
You're an
saying...
authority figure to him. It's totally inappropriate to talk to a child that way. They're learning who they are, and they trust you.
You saying that to him when he was a kid is having implications today for people's purses being stolen, children not getting enough food from their parents, or potentially having those things repeated at them, your grandchildren, in fact. So we just want to come here to find some kind of resolution where you can realize that what you did was wrong and apologize to your son. That's what we're hoping for.
Apologies. Everyone wants an apology these days. Everyone gets a handout. Everyone comes knocking at the door. Oh, sorry for this, sorry for that. What about me? When I was a kid, they called me a piece of shit. They stepped on me. They said I was no good. Did I let it affect me? No. Did I ask for an apology? No.
Well, first of all, let me just be the first person then to tell you that I'm sorry that those things happened to you.
On behalf of everyone. I mean, that is just not justice. That's not what we stand for, sir.
You're of an age where I assume the people who said those things to you as a kid have passed.
Long
and
dead, it looks like.
We can no longer go see them about this, but we would if it was possible.
The way that they spoke to you when you were so young, when you were just learning, as an authority figure, that's not right. It sickens me to know that you've had to struggle this whole time without the support you need.
Yeah. At the same time, it's not an excuse for what you said to your son. And just because you were treated poorly doesn't give you the right to treat your own son poorly. It may be an explanation, but it's not a justification. And so with the understanding that, we feel for you as well, we still think that it would be right for you to apologize to your son.
Yeah. It might be too late for me, but it's not too late for him. He wasn't a piece of shit. He was a good kid. He just made mistakes sometimes. It's
All kids make mistakes. All people make mistakes.
Yeah, and in the Shalif department, we believe people should be given that grace to make mistakes and then come back, and they should be given a second chance, sir. Do you think I deserve a second chance after what I did to my boy?
I don't just think it, I believe it at the deepest part of my soul. That's what inspired me to become a Chalif officer in the first place.
And I can see right now, sir, you're giving yourself a second chance. I can tell that you're thinking about how we can change the way we impact the world, how we can redeem ourselves for the mistakes we make and forgive ourselves for the mistake we make. Ultimately, it's up to you, sir, but I believe that you can forgive yourself and move on from what was just a mistake.
So why don't you just head inside, pick up that phone, call your son?
Yeah, I will. Thank you so much. This has been a great interaction with law enforcement. I love the Chalif department. Okay, bye now. Thank you so much for your sweet words.
All right, I think that about wraps it up. Another day, another case solved.
Another chain of injustice unlinked and then relinked injustice.
Into a form of justice. Yeah, that's just what we do.
That's
at
what
the
we
Chalif
do.
Department. It's why people love us so much.
Yeah, that's right.
It's only right that the purveyors of justice in a society would be universally loved, and it's a measure of their effectiveness, I think.
Absolutely.
That we are.
Yeah. Ultimately, good boys. What you gonna do? What you gonna do?
boys.
Underneath it all, good boys. What you gonna do? But yeah, so when we're thinking about the transition from an unjust justice system to a just justice system, one of the things that I think is a stumbling block or a challenge or maybe even something to grapple with in a way that isn't purely adversarial is that there's this kind of human urge, I think, that I don't think is entirely socialized, something that I've experienced, and it seems that almost everyone I've ever met experiences, which is that there's a little joy and thrill in punishing someone for doing wrong.
You want to get some revenge.
Someone does something, or like people who fuck around and find out is a whole subgenre of the internet. Someone does something wrong and you're watching as a bystander. They do something unprincipled, something mean, something foolish, and then as a result, they get punished, immediate punishment, visual punishment. That's the subgenre of fuck around and find out.
Sure. Like instant karma. To me, the most satisfying fucking around and finding out things is when the comeuppance is a direct result of their negative actions. Like you do a negative thing, and then because you did that negative thing, a bad thing happens to you. Sometimes it's more like arbitrarily a different bad thing happens to you. And that's like, it's a bit less satisfying. It can still be satisfying, but it's not.
Yeah. Like you punch someone in the face, so you have to go sit in a jail cell for 5 years. It's like kind of an arbitrary.
Yeah, I think people think of that as naturalized because it's so socially naturalized, but it is kind of an arbitrary, like you got punched in the face, so somebody else punched you in the face. I guess that's also somewhat arbitrary, but it feels more like a direct response. Like you made someone so mad and they were like, hey, turnabout's fair play. I'm going to punch you in the face too.
Yeah. In the criminal justice system, like when people are sent to jail, I guess part of the psychological framework of why that system was created, how it's enabled and why it's supported today is this sense of like righteous punishment being like, you do want to see pieces of shit go to jail on some level. Cause it's like, go to jail, totally. Motherfucker.
I think
it's like, go to jail.
I think I think it's an understandable desire, and I think it's not maladaptive or anything. Like it makes sense why we would have this emotional response, why it's kind of like an ingrained thing within our psychology to want to see bad things happen to bad people. But I do think it's also an impulse that I think we need to temper socially, because it can, I mean, I think it can clearly go too far. And you can see that all the time where people are like, oh, you punched me in the face. Now it's okay for me to stab you. Or like that impulse in people can lead people to do things that are worse than the original thing that was done to them, because you're satisfying this emotional need for revenge or punishment. Like someone could smoke a joint and then someone could literally think that it's just that you be put in prison for 7 years or something like that. And you just feel like, yeah, fuck, well, you did this horrible thing. It's right that you should be put in jail for 7 years. So the impulse is understandable. And in some cases, I totally agree with it, both intellectually and not. But I think in general, it's the kind of thing that we should temper. And I also think it's not the most effective way of preventing future incidents.
Yeah, we're prison abolitionists. We've got a whole episode on that you look up in our feed. It's a nice big episode on prison abolition. But we always maintained in that episode, and do now, that if people are an immediate threat to others, structurally, there needs to be ways to prevent them from harming other people.
Yeah.
That's a very practical intervention as compared to oh, you're going to be punished, so you need to be held in a room as if you're an immediate threat to other people when you're obviously not.
Yeah, I'm pretty against punishment as a motivating factor behind any sort of broader institutional justice system. I think what it should be doing is helping with accountability, accounting for things that have happened that are wrong, healing and amends making, ensuring that harms aren't repeated. So that can include, as you're saying, detainment, keeping people away from society until we can be sure, we understand the behavioral root of what happened and we're relatively certain that it's not going to happen again. I think those are the more important and more functional sort of principles that should be behind what we do with somebody after they've done something wrong.
Yeah, and some aspects of that might feel like a punishment. I was just imagining, say, a just, democratic, ecological, egalitarian system that involves redresses for antisocial incidents between people here. Losing your ability to drive your car because you're a danger to other people might feel like a punishment, but the impetus of it isn't that human urge to get back at you.
It just coincidentally helps, it feels a little good on that level, which, you can have that as a freebie, a little free treat.
Yeah, and with the right education system, we could get people. You know how when we used to argue online together, we'd take the super high road all the time, and you could kind of feel like you were owning them in a weird way, you're on your own logic circuit.
Yeah.
So whatever they're trying to do to get under your skin and stuff, you're staying above it all, and you're kind of patting yourself on the back a bit,
yeah, totally,
by being so selfless and gracious and so on. It's through a good education system, we could make everyone feel really good and really pat themselves on the back about specific type of revenge you're getting on them, which is making them take classes and
yeah, I don't imagine this process to be fun. I think a lot of time people who are all about punishment are oh, you just want to coddle criminals and
you want to kiss them on the head,
tell them everything's going to be okay and send them back out into the world. It's no, when I'm talking about detaining someone and then assessing the behavioral root of what's going on for them and why they did that thing to ensure that it doesn't happen again. I don't imagine that as being a very fun process for the person. Being psychologically evaluated to figure out why you did a thing and how we can be certain that that's never going to happen again isn't an easy going, you're just whistling through it. It's such a great process. Dealing with accountability and making amends for the things that you did wrong. I don't see that as a very easy, fun process for a perpetrator to go through. I'm not saying this should be, just giving people a big smooch and saying, off you go. It doesn't have to be a pleasant process for everybody involved. It just should be directly related to healing, and to the extent that you can't always right a wrong that's been done. Some things are just wrongs that forever will be fucked up in some way, like you've broken something irrevocably, potentially. But to the extent that you can, righting wrongs and ensuring that they don't happen again.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain type of revenge too, and like if someone has broken something irrevocably in a way that's harmed others, the normie the normie response is like, lock them in a cage forever, give them only the worst food, allow others to rape them.
It's funny if they get raped.
Yeah. No. Whereas like we're proposing a more of a refined taste on our revenge here. We empower them to have their self-reflective ability to be haunted by the fact that they broke something irrevocable. That part of their punishment is they have to live with that the way that any of us would have to live with something like that. There's a natural punitive fabric to the universe when you do harm in that way.
Yeah.
That if you have the self-awareness and self-reflection to be bothered by doing wrong, like that is part of the goal. And that is it's a twisted punishment, but I'm sick enough to advocate for it. I'm such an authoritarian asshole. I'm such an authoritarian, violent person that I'm willing to doom someone who harms others to have to reckon with the fact and look in the mirror and know what that means. And if they don't know what that means, if they don't feel the power of that, then we're going to help build them up to the point where they're able to do that.
Yeah, help them unrepress those feelings and connect to it.
And we're going to make them sit down and talk about their childhood and stuff. We're going to like...
Yeah. And I mean, in theory, there are people who will never feel those things. They don't feel guilt. I just said, as you were talking about this, this person being like, oh, what about complete psychopath, sociopath, whatever? I don't even know if that necessarily means you'll never feel guilt. There's probably a spectrum on it. I don't know enough about the topic to really talk about it. But assuming that people like that to some extent exist, who at least for as long as they live and our current methods would never be able to connect to those feelings, fair enough, you can't punish them in that particular way. But I don't think that's most people. So... Now we're back with another episode of Nailed It or Not, Justice Edition.
So we got some cliches and quotes about justice, and we're going to evaluate whether nailed it or not.
Oh, I'm so excited. Let's dig in.
This one's a classic. The law in its majestic equality forbids rich and poor alike to sleep under bridges, to beg in the streets, and to steal their bread. And that's Anatole France.
I would say nailed it.
Yeah,
totally nailed it.
That's a strong nailed it for me. I mean, I think pointing out the hypocrisy of a universal approach to crime, sleeping under bridges, no one does it by choice. The rich never go and sleep under bridges to break the law. If you make it illegal to be homeless, you're making it illegal to not have enough money to live.
It really shows how a sort of veneer of fairness can be used to cover up for deeper injustices, and that when we're crafting rules and laws, we have to look into that, not just between rich and poor, but along lines of race, gender, ability, and so on.
Absolutely. Here's another one. There's some different variations on this, but this is a classic protest chant now. No justice, no peace.
Yeah, I think that's a good principle. I think if there's an injustice that is being allowed to on-go, then you shouldn't peacefully submit to injustice.
Yeah, I'm going to have to give a double nailed it on this one, because it nails it on one level in saying, if there's no justice, we won't give you peace. But then it also nails it on another level, which is saying, whether I do anything or not, if there's not justice, there will not be peace. Both of those are profound concepts. One is an organizational threat, and one of them is more of a description of a social reality, that there can't be peace as long as there is injustice. So it places people who don't care about justice but do care about peace in an unwinnable argument. The contradiction of their position is exposed by it. And for that, it's a beautiful nailed it phrase.
Yeah, nailed it. Totally.
This is another cliche. Justice delayed is justice denied.
I'm going to give that one a nailed it.
Got to agree.
Delaying justice. I mean, obviously it gets worse the longer it's delayed, but any delay of justice is a withering or a chipping away at the potential for justice. And especially when you think about people who are like held in detainment for weeks or months before even getting a hearing, and then let alone a trial date, it can completely screw up people's lives to have to deal with long wait times in the justice system when they potentially were completely innocent.
Yeah, and thinking in a political sense in society, it's really frequent that when activists and organizational groups are butting heads with the government is like delaying things, studying things indefinitely, doing trials of things, instead of implementing what's needed for people. Like a great example is social below market housing. There's always this fight that happens everywhere, which is you have sites that are reserved for it, and then there's like an 8-year delay for no reason, and then there's debate on whether it's going to even stay social housing anymore, and then people have to mobilize again to get it to stay social housing, and it becomes this like perpetually kick down the road,
Right.
12, 14, 15, 16 years later, no housing is built. And that housing should have been just decent housing for people at the time that the land was originally earmarked for that. And now it's almost a generation later and it's still sitting empty, and it's ambiguous whether it's even going to be what they said it was going to be. So nailed it. Double nailed it. Here's a quote from Orson Welles that I found interesting about justice. He said, "Never expect justice in the world. That is not part of God's plan. Nobody gets justice. People only get good luck or bad luck." So a little bit of a different tone here from Orson Welles, but when I read that quote on justice, I thought we should bring it into the nailed it or not chamber, regardless.
Yeah, that one's a difficult one. It's less talking about what justice should be and more talking about whether you should expect justice.
Yeah.
And there's multiple layers to that. In a cosmic sense, there's no insurance of justice, obviously. I think if he's talking in a sort of religious sense, that people expect that justice will be doled out or that God makes all things just, I think that's wrong, and he's correct that you should not expect that to happen. That's my opinion. And then whether a society will have unjust outcomes, talking in the context of the current society, it's completely true that you should not expect just outcomes, and that a lot of it is just luck. And if you were lucky enough to be born rich, or just whatever your position in society that you're lucky enough to be born into, you could have wildly different outcomes than someone who is just unlucky. And that luck has more to do with it than justice in our current system.
Yeah, and just looking back on your life, honestly, I look back on my life and think of the opportunities I got at different times, and so much of it was such random static that just happened to luck. It was almost never had to do with my virtue, unfortunately, although I was trying my best.
Right.
So in that sense, I really do think there is a strand of nailed it here.
Yeah, I think there's those two ways in which it's kind of nailed it. But I want to hold out there. I have this uncertain, because I think we should be able to live in a society where we can expect justice, and that's a thing to strive for, and that what he's saying is kind of defeatist, that you should just never expect that.
Yeah, there is a little bit of an implicit, if not explicit, kind of resignation against the transformation of society there.
Yeah.
This is Orson Welles. He's like a public figure. He's a rich man saying this. And for that, it gives it a certain grotesque tone. But it's good to admit that it's luck when you're in a position of success. I'd say at least partially nailed it, with the caveat that we want to render this quote entirely obsolete. If we do our job right, our grandchildren will say not even partially nailed it.
Yeah.
Martin Luther King said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Now, this is a great quote in many ways. And when I was younger, I would have definitely said,
Nailed it.
But I'm a little bit convinced that Martin Luther King missed with this one, because
It's a controversial take. Not nailed it? Martin Luther King did not nail it?
I think Martin Luther King has nailed it on justice many times, don't get me wrong. For example, when Martin Luther King said, "Power is at its best love implementing the demand of justice, and justice is at its best power correcting everything that stands against love," nailed it, obviously.
Yeah, total nailed it.
But when he said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, I think Orson Welles, unfortunately, is a little bit closer to the structure of reality. I know, and it kind of sucks too, but like justice needs to be built. And the moral universe doesn't have a trajectory. And that's scary. And it puts a lot of responsibility on us to maintain the garden of justice.
Yeah, I think it's possible with hard work over time to bend the arc of moral history towards justice. And on a lot of issues, we have seen that. And I think it makes sense to kind of think about, the history of civil rights, obviously, what Martin Luther King was thinking about, or the history of feminism, or there's been a lot of things where there has been real wins and there's been a bend towards justice. And if you keep pushing that ball, you can keep making progress. But at the same time, it is totally possible for historical situations to go in the complete opposite direction and for things to get far worse for a really long time. There's no inherent bend towards it. I do think there's a tendency that can be tapped into, and I think that's what the best version of that quote is to me. But the idea that it's necessarily true, that there's a moral arc to the universe that goes one way, I don't fully agree with, for sure.
Yeah, there's a beautiful poetry to it, and the Steelman version is basically, the path towards justice isn't always going to be a direct one, but over the long run of history, I have confidence that human power can change human power, that we can decide to move in the direction of justice, and that is what we're contributing to in the work that we do.
Yeah, and don't take setbacks as some sign that we're never gonna get where we want to head to.
Yeah, that's the arc being long.
Yeah.
Whereas I would more frame it, it feels really pedantic now that I've sketched this, but I think it's important to note that you can genuinely move back. Like, I've got confidence in humanity's ability to fight off this potential, but that potential is always there, and you can arc away from justice permanently and never recover. Remembering that possibility is real, I think, is important for the urgency that we need.
Yeah, I agree.
So anyways, I'm going to say partially nailed it, though. I think it'd be too harsh to say that a non-nail it. I think the Steelman version is really genuinely what he means and is a really good point.
Coward.
Pedantry aside, I have to find myself at least partially agreeing with the great Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, partial nailed it. I agree. Sorry for calling you a coward.
Sometimes I have cowardly moments, like anyone. I mean, I think, do I pretend to always be brave? I've got some permanent bravery on every subject at every time? No, of course not. But I'm happy. I'm content with that. I don't feel the need to put on an act or even change myself on that front. I think a healthy amount of cowardice, it's just that. It's healthy. It's
Yeah, we never use brave as an insult, but maybe we should.
Yeah, that's right. The wrong bravery at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. That's worse than basic cowardice.
That's true.
Like, it's really brave of people to come out as a Nazi to their liberal family. That's the wrong bravery at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. And it's brave to go to war to fight for the Islamic Caliphate if you're a member of ISIS. I wish they were a little more cowardly on that front. It'd be best for everyone.
Yeah, maybe, imagining a society where everybody is a coward all the time. I wonder if that would be better.
We'll have to talk about that some other time.
We'll figure that out someday.
It might be fun to construct. So in our utopia, I was imagining not just the most extreme crime, but something fairly minor. Let's say urinating in public. Urinating in public, it's not a big deal. But if everyone did it all the time, it would be a big deal. So you want to prevent people from urinating in public. And the main way you prevent people from urinating in public is by making public washrooms available. That's our Utopian Justice Department in action.
Right.
Tackling the urinating in public crisis. They invest in public washrooms. And it gets rid of most of the urinating in public. But there's a persistent... maybe people
a persistent trickle.
Persistent trickle. And maybe these are people who got used to urinating in public in the old system and they never changed their ways. Or maybe they're people who have developed the habit of urinating in public since that happened for other reasons that we'd have to prod their mind to fully understand.
Yeah, maybe they just they get a thrill out of it, a little exhibitionist thrill.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing.
I don't know if you're going to get rid of that with public washrooms or education.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
as-
yeah,
I
so-
mean, I urinate in public sometimes, and the reason that I do so is because there aren't public washrooms available. So I'm part of that criminal
Right.
subsection of the urinating in public people. But if, say, we have an exhibitionist or someone who, whatever kind of, we have to call a psychologist, someone who is repeatedly doing it, like you get caught urinating in public. Well, I think first you get a gentle warning, right? It's just not that severe, right? It's
for sure.
It's
yeah.
like, hey, you kids, don't urinate like that. Don't urinate there in public. I use the word urinate all the time. I usually say piss in real life. Piss.
But we're talking about the law.
yeah,
here.
let's get
The law
intellectual
The law
with it.
wouldn't say piss; it would say urinate.
Quit pissing over there. The No Pissing Act passed by Parliament.
Yeah, you want to have graduated sanctions. So yeah, you start with something pretty minor, like a warning.
Yeah, so you got a few, maybe even a few verbal warnings. It's small enough, it's not that. But you get to the point, hey, man, this is the 6th time we've caught you peeing in public, which means you've done it at least 11 times. So now we're getting a little more stern. We're saying this is your last warning. We catch you one more time, you're going to feel it in your life somehow. And it's going to be a small thing at first, but it's going to keep building like a snowball. Eventually, you're going to have you keep up this peeing in public stuff. Eventually, you're not going to have such a great life. I think it's a reasonable, I mean, that's an extreme way to put it, but you gotta, there has to be a threshold where it's like, seriously, I'm being stern. Time to stop pissing in public, man.
Yeah, I think too, like I'm not saying urinating in public should ever be allowed, even if it was so minimal that it wasn't really causing a problem. But the more that it's causing a problem too, I think should also affect how severe some of these sanctions are. But yeah, I mean, like generally, I would say if someone keeps peeing in public despite repeated warnings, maybe you can have things like treats are taken away or there's some privilege that's removed, or we can think of like sort of punishments like that. But like, to me, the root of it is like, okay, like why are you doing this, and figuring it out, and then figuring out how can you meet that need in some other way that isn't antisocial, that isn't causing other people to have to like step in puddles of piss or smell your piss next to their dumpster or wherever you're pissing that's causing the issue.
There's another aspect too. I think it's just important when I'm imagining peeing in public, I'm imagining peeing like in really public places that are harming the public good. Say like when you walk down the street and it reeks like piss.
Right.
You don't want that. But like in a forest and stuff, I think, maybe that's an anarchist urine zone. I don't know.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we
Well, I
could
think
work,
like
we'll
on
ask
hikes.
the ecologist.
I think it's okay to pee on hikes. Like it's normal.
Or even like in a bush or whatever.
Yeah, it's better in a bush for sure.
Than the subway tiles where it's just going to pool dry and then leave a scent.
Yeah, or you're like in a subway train, like you're just peeing in the corner of the subway
That's not
train.
okay. That's like, I think you get
that's
stern.
I think just one incident of that should.
You go to stern right away with that. You're like, hey, we don't piss on there like that. We piss in the urinal car. Because all the train cars have urinal cars because we're not some barbaric anti-urination society.
But I mean, yeah, like what's going on here? What is there an incontinence issue? Is this some
Right. And it's time to get
exhibitionist thrill? Yeah, it's time to get-
state-sponsored diapers.
Yeah, there's free diapers available. I didn't know if you knew, but adult diapers, and they're pretty thin now. People won't even see them through your pants. They can be quite sleek.
Absolutely.
I'm assuming. I don't know how the current technology, but in a utopia, we'll have great diapers.
Yeah, I think the current ones are pretty. I don't know.
They're probably fine. I don't know. I haven't.
We should try them out for an episode.
Yeah, we won't have to keep getting up to pee the whole time.
Oh man, if we both wore like adult diapers for a week and just like committed to urinating in them and then reported back, that would be like, there's certain podcasts that reach a certain level of like world class,
Right.
and that's just one. Anyways, we'll keep it in our back pocket.
Part of our Utopian Justice series, the pissing in diapers.
Yeah,
Spectacular.
if we get 20 new patrons after this episode releases, if we hit 20, we'll do it. But it needs to
I don't
be
know about a week. I don't know. Like maybe one day or something.
We'll work out the details later. Okay, 25 new patrons.
But yeah, my assumption is that if we have ample public washrooms available and if we offer people free diapers and for the recalcitrant ongoing pissers, we have someone come and talk to them and get to the bottom of why they're doing it and try to figure out with them how to make it stop, I think public pissing would be a zero problem. But, you know, for the... it's kind of begging the question, say, well, what if they don't? What if someone just refuses and like no other punishments we offer work, like nothing we take away from them, no privileges we refuse for them, not like we can't figure out any other solution. I would say we can detain them. Like generally I would want to reserve detainment for violent offenders, but if someone is like just pissing on people's tables in restaurants or pissing in subway cars or pissing in churches and surgery rooms and like they're just pissing everywhere, then yeah, eventually I think they would have to be detained in a nice room, maybe with a drain on the floor.
We now go to the criminal trial of the unrepentant public pisser who lives in a utopian society where the death penalty has been abolished and replaced with a perfectly transformative, restorative, rehabilitative justice system which is fair and produces no harm while responding to harm.
Your Honor, if I may address the court,
Please, unrepentant pisser.
I just want to say that I'm not sorry for what I did. I would do it again in an instant.
Order in the court, order in the court.
It is my greatest hope and dream that one day we will all be doing it. We will all be urinating in public wherever we want, freely. True freedom is what I fight for. Thank you.
Call up the prosecution to examine him.
So, Mr. Unrepentant Pisser, you say that you want to liberate the people of the world by spraying your liberating piss all over the train cars, the public places, the children's play structures, the staircases of the world. Is this correct?
Yes, that's correct. Though I would say I only do children's play structures when the children are not there.
Well, I should hope so. And is it true that you're currently wearing a locked state-designed diaper designed just for you at great public expense to prevent you from urinating in public spaces, which was your 95th offense of public urination?
Yes, I have been unjustly imprisoned in a locking diaper that I am currently doing my best to soak my way through, but the state has limited my liquid consumption to try and prevent me from overfilling the diaper and causing leakage in the court, which is my goal.
My heart goes out to you, Mr. Unrepentant Pisser, on your shortcomings. Is it true that you have successfully taken off the diaper or soaked your way through 12 consecutive times now?
Yes, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
And is it true that you've played no part in the court-ordered cleanup duties to wipe up your own piss from public places, having it fall on other people?
I am a conscientious objector to those actions, sir.
I think we've heard enough. The man is an unrepentant public pisser. No amount of graduated sanctions has changed his behavior. He is a disproportionate drain on our utopian state resources, with teams of dozens of workers creating new and more complicated diapers for him to break out of, at great public expense, only to have the urine still flow in our public places where we bring our families. It brings me no joy to say this in a society which has abolished the death penalty. But the prosecution is arguing for a once-in-a-lifetime, a once-in-10 lifetimes case for public execution. The man is a menace. He is a urinator. Unrepentant.
Order in the court, order in the court. They have every right to put forward the case for execution. Defendant, do you want to give your closing statement before we bring this to the jury?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you, I would. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I am a simple man. I dream of a future world in which everybody not only pees wherever they want, but they're used to the smell of piss everywhere. And in that world, not only would we be free of the tyranny of the toilet, we would have the full capacity to enjoy that freedom. And you can do whatever you want with me. You can get rid of me in the first public execution in 500 years if you want. But ideas are like urine, and they will leak out, and some messes cannot be cleaned up. Thank you.
And that was the final statement of the unrepentant pisser in today's trial, shortly after he was sentenced to death and killed in front of onlookers. People who watched the execution had this to say. Oh, it was just horrible. No one should be killed that way.
I don't know what's happening to our society. Like, what happened to good old locking them in a room with a drain on the floor?
I thought we were beyond this. To see this barbaric execution has shaken my faith and everything.
I was planning to have children, but who would want to bring children into a world like this?
While public polling showed the public was firmly against urinating in public train cars, the gruesome video of his public execution has radically swung public opinion in the opposite direction.
I thought it was crazy at first, but first time you give it a try and you say, hey, this ain't so bad.
When did I start peeing on public train cars? Yeah, I think it was after. Was it before? No, it was after he was executed. It was just too big of an injustice, and it was true. We got used to the smell really fast.
I don't even know what the problem with it ever was. I mean, we're all wearing shoes, right? It's not like we're walking around barefoot through these puddles. What's the big deal?
Urine is sterile, and I feel cleaner, honestly. And I'll just close that history book, and that's why, grandson, we always pee everywhere now. And,
I'm peeing right now, Grandpa.
Oh, I'm so proud of you, boy. Making a big, big mess on the carpet. Well, that will dry soon enough. And we're used to the smell, as you well know.
I don't even know what smell you're talking about.
So, although he was eccentric, and almost no one agreed with him when he was still around, when that great unrepentant pisser became a martyr for the cause, and the state treated him as a piece of shit, for the first time in over 500 years, it radically swung public opinion in a way where his ideas won. You know, you can wipe up piss, grandson, but you can't wipe up an idea whose time has come. Sure, there'll be splashback, and sometimes you gotta flush and start all over again. But the arc of urine may be long, but it bends towards justice. Spraying and spraying.
Wow, Grandpa, that's beautiful.
It smells like justice, which, if you're surrounded by justice, smells like nothing at all. Now, put her there, shake my hand.
Sure, Grandpa, yeah. Shake hands.
There we go.
Nice.
Your hand is still a little bit wet from when you were just urinating.
Yeah, I just had my hand resting in the carpet.
Yeah, I just wiped it off on my pants. It's okay. Normal. That's actually normal for us. You know what they say, make sure to piss on your hands after you wipe your ass. And that is the story of the perfect utopian society and how we got there.
That's amazing, yeah. I mean, who would have thought that once we were all smelling each other's piss all the time, we would not only be able to begin detecting diseases that way and create a medical revolution that extended people's lives for hundreds of years, but also that we were able to connect to one another psychically.
Yeah, when the urine reached a certain concentration in the floorboards and the cars and the
walls,
streets,
ceilings,
covered in a fine layer of it, it turns out that it has a type of communicative quality
via the pheromones.
Yeah, almost like the mycelium networks underneath a forest,
Right.
except with urine.
Yeah, and human beings and animals too.
Yeah, it allows us to psychically talk with one another with a greater degree of clarity on real intentions, which solved a lot of strife and disorder.
Oh, yeah.
And apparently, what they're theorizing now is this is how humans always communicated back when we used to urinate all over ourselves in our living environment. But
before the fallen period where we indoor plumbing.
At some point, we became fallen. We started urinating out in the forest. So the theory goes, we lost that psychic ability, had to turn our grunts into language, which was always going to be just a rough approximation.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, and it all comes down to that one, they thought they had a utopia, but he saw through it. He just started pissing right on the subway. It turns out that's what you needed.
Yeah, it's a beautiful moment in our history. Proud to be here at the end of it all.
Yeah, that's justice.
Yeah.
That's real justice, let's say.
Yeah, and justice comes first.
Utopian justice. So yeah, I don't like the death penalty. I think legal governmental system using their power to kill someone is a bad thing. I think it's bad even if they're guilty, but you can't ensure that you're only executing people who are guilty. Like innocent people are executed by the state when they would have otherwise been exonerated of their crimes. Pretty abysmal shit.
Yeah, my go-to framework for deciding if it's okay to kill someone is like, is it necessary to prevent a harm? Like, is there literally no other option? When I say necessary, I mean like absolutely necessary. Like there is no other way. And if you're a state, there's pretty much always another way. You can keep someone in detention for the rest of their life. I can't really think of a scenario in which a state needs to kill a person in order to stop them from doing something in a death penalty type way. Like there can be situations where in the moment, you've been called to a domestic abuse situation. The person has the knife raised and they're like about to stab it into the other person. And the only thing you can possibly do to stop it in that moment is to shoot them and they die. Like, yeah. Sure, absolutely. That was necessary in that moment to prevent harm. Makes perfect sense. But yeah, like a death penalty, like we have you detained, you're controlled, but we're going to decide to kill you is never necessary. And like, I also just find it like kind of gross. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's kind of a minor side point, but the example of shooting someone who's literally about to stab someone else from across the room. Just another ethical point, a utopian justice point I want to lay down there is like the same rules should apply to a civilian and like an agent of the justice system, whether it's police or future alternatives, etc. Agents of the justice system should have no special right to kill.
Oh, yeah. No, totally.
Whatever justification for killing that they would use in an example like that would have
if
to apply equally to a member of the public.
If anything, they should have more restrictive requirements because they are trained to deal with situations like this.
Yeah, so they have more options by definition,
they have
basically.
Whereas like an untrained person panic in the moment. Like it's more understandable to do something that like technically maybe you could think of another option. And you'd be like, well, I didn't think of that in the moment. A trained person should. So yeah, if anything, I would say they should have more restrictive capacities. True. But yeah.
So institutionally and structurally, there's certain responsibilities, not just of like agents of the system, but as a whole, to not condemn people to death. Like a system that has the resources, capacity, and backing to keep people alive and determine alternate ways to
keep other people safe. Yeah. Other than killing a person.
Yeah, it's unjustifiable to make the choice to kill them if there are ample other options available. And pretty much structurally, anytime you're dealing with like an agent of a state that has powers of taxation, etc., like we're talking about a sufficiently powerful organization here, where we're talking about the laws of a nation and the current society.
So yeah, I think death penalty is always wrong in that context, but I can imagine contexts in which the death penalty like could make more sense. Like,
yeah, I was reading about Inuit traditional justice systems. It was like this oral history that was recorded by the Canadian government. I found on a website. I'll link it in the description. It's interesting. It's like a PowerPoint presentation. And one of the things that they said is that in the traditional Inuit justice system, they would sometimes kill people, but it would only be if they were like an immediate and persistent threat to others who weren't going to change their ways. They would otherwise like socially ostracize them or kick them out of the community first.
Right.
I think that is pretty a wise framework. And also they have limited options, right? Like if you kick someone out of your community and they come back and try to kill you again, you're like at war with them, and you have
it's like what else are you gonna do? Or like it's always useful to go to like a desert island scenario for some of these situations to test your logic. And you're like, you're on a desert island, your plane crashes there's 30 people. Someone has made it clear that they're going to continue attacking others, either through their actions or their words, that like, you don't have the resources there to keep them in a nice room and to talk about their childhood trauma and like why they're doing what they're doing. You might not even have the resources to just keep them chained up in a way that you feel is sufficiently safe for everyone on an ongoing basis.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, it's like, you try to do other things first, obviously, like figure out some situation where you don't have to, but I could see having to kill someone in that situation.
Yeah, like I've definitely got a strong pacifist leaning on this kind of stuff. But you put, say, you, me, and a third person on an island, and he's raped both of us on the island. And then we were like, hey, don't do that. And he's like,
Nah,
maybe I will.
Both of you. I'll just keep doing it.
Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Okay, so like that's the most visceral situation you can be in. Like that you are being stalked by a rapist on a small island. Like, yeah, when the history book is written of the island adventure, anyone's going to be like, that was when Sean and Aaron turned evil and showed their true darkness or something.
They showed their hypocrisy on the issue of the death penalty because they always claimed to be against the death penalty. But when push came to shove, but I mean, honestly, like if I could call a team to come pick this person up and they would be detained until it was certain that they would never do this again, I would prefer that option. But then, you know, that option's not available on this desert island. So, or even a tropical island. It doesn't even matter the climate of the island. It's
right. It could be a peninsula that's just too big to walk, you know? It could,
yeah, no, totally.
or that you think is an island at first, you later realize was a peninsula.
Yeah, and I think that's like a broader point with this, that some of these like heavy punishments are easier and less resource intensive than more restorative, rehabilitative justice framework, where like getting to the root of why a violent person continues to be violent and helping them get to a place where we can behaviorally say we know that they're not going to do that again takes way more resources than killing them. Obviously, it takes even more resources than just locking them in a room and not doing anything else with them, just feeding them and keeping them alive or whatever. It's a luxury almost, in a sense, of having a society with enough resources to dedicate to institutions of like a broader utopian justice kind of sphere. And I think one of the criticisms of restorative justice from the left is that like it gets applied sometimes in situations, or people attempt to apply it in situations where you can't really do that. And it ends up letting abusive people off the hook. Where like, you know, you're in some leftist organization and there's like accusations of sexual assault, let's say. And then it's like, oh, you know, we should be rehabilitative and restored. Let's not be punitive against this person and like kick them out of the organization. We need to.
Yeah, and a lot of these organizations, they have, say, like 100 to 1,000 members, of which you have like 10 to 20 active volunteers using. No one's getting paid for it, like these community organizations and stuff where this sort of stuff happens. And then, yeah, people, for the best reasons, put this responsibility on themselves to be kind of like the curator and guide of some wayward soul. And I think
without the expertise to do that.
Yeah, or resources.
Or the resources to hire the expertise or like deal or like to actually keep the other people safe.
So yeah,
it ends up just like, letting abusive people slip by with kind of like, oh yeah, I typed out my Notes app apology or whatever and said I'm sorry. And that's good enough. Let's be restorative. Let's move on.
I think for people who are abusive and trying to absolve themselves of like social responsibility for that abuse, naturally they're going to use any sort of language set around that can orient or frame it in terms of a social power that they have. Rehabilitative justice is morally right in that institutions have
greater responsibility.
Yeah, institutions have a responsibility to be benevolent and to not just like dispose of people based on their size and power and so on. But for small activist organizations, if someone has been abusive to others in it, there's no value in having a prolonged process around that outside of like maybe demands of the victim.
Right.
But then even then, like structurally, in order to have a just and fair society, like you need to go to third-party referees for this kind of thing. Like
totally, like a bunch of people who've been in an organization with the person aren't the right people to be like assessing their ongoing danger of further abuse.
You have this like environmental justice committee or something like that, and then someone does something wrong within it. And then in order to be like as high-minded and just as possible, they devote all the resources of their committee to like trying
Keeping an abusive person in the group.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think something like that, like the old way is you just kick them out of town, you know?
Yeah.
And they go and find other towns, and that's maybe an issue too, but there's only so much you can do in this world, you know? Like you can warn other people depending on
Yeah.
the severity of the thing and so on.
And even if you're like against the current justice system, like there can sometimes be value in utilizing it. Like, you know, we don't have a better alternative available, and like depending on the severity or like in the desire of the victim and whatnot, obviously like reporting things like that as a crime can be one thing that might be helpful at some point, especially if they do it more than once, or, you know, who knows? The current justice system sucks ass for those kinds of things, but occasionally it can be a little bit helpful. But
Yeah, like a restraining order type. I mean, like
Yeah.
I think a restraining order in the right circumstances for the right reasons is something that
absolutely.
I wouldn't advise against.
Yeah. And I think another critique of like restorative justice is this idea that like victims are going to have to be participants in their abuser's healing process, that this is like somehow required. But I would just say in my ideal version of it, that's not required at all. Like it's an option if you want to participate, but even if there was some third party referee to refer it to in this environmental justice committee for them to be like, hey, this thing happened, we want this person to go through an accountability process. I don't think the members of that committee, maybe other than like making an initial statement about what happened, or like you obviously got to explain what the problem was, but like the extent that people want to participate in the restorative justice process for a person who's done something wrong, I think should be pretty voluntary, especially for the people who are the victims of it.
Hey, Mr. Boss, it's Mikey calling.
Hey, Mikey, are you on your way into the office? We got a lot of work to do today and the next few weeks. You know that, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I'm calling you here from the side of the road. There's been an accident.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, it's.
Is it bad? Are you hurt?
I'm totally fine. The car's fine, just minor denting. We're all insured. It's totally fine.
Okay.
But he was distracted driving when he hit me. So
Oh,
that has
no.
started a mandatory rehabilitative justice process.
Of course.
So I'm going to need to take the next 3 weeks off work. And I know we're in the middle of this huge project. I'm really the only one who understands it. And it's a 3-week deadline. But I need to sit down with him, help express to him how he harmed me, and see what sort of repair we can do together. And we have to look into his childhood. We have to bring in his parents. And I'm going to be his steward through this. As the victim of his crime, it's up to me to help fix him.
Yeah, that's justice, yeah. Well, look, this project, you're the backbone of it. You know that, I know that. If we don't make the deadline this year, there's always next year we can try. And our business will just have to take that one on the chin because justice comes first.
Yeah, I mean, justice has to come first. And
It's your responsibility.
he was distracted driving, and we had a fender bender. And yes, so I need 3 weeks off work.
Let's just be thankful that nobody got hurt, because then it would have been a 3-month process minimum.
Yeah, that's just the thing. We're preventing people from being hurt by doing this.
Right,
And that comes
exactly.
first.
Yeah. All right, thanks for calling. Bye.
Okay, bye. Good luck with the big project that
Yes.
only I understand.
Thank you for wishing good luck. We'll do our best without you.
Well, you're
but
welcome.
It won't be the same.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming today to this press conference. It is I, the Peach of Chalif, and I'm here to address some of the things that have recently happened. But before I get into detail on that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the work we've been doing here at the Chalif Department, because I'm really proud of what we've achieved here during my tenure, and I believe in the Chalif Department and what we're doing. And I think that the results speak for themselves. Number one, satisfaction numbers with our services are through the roof, especially compared to the old police department that we replaced. We've managed to reach resolutions on over 80% of incidents that all of the people involved in the incidents agree was a just outcome, and we're aiming for 90% this year. We have identified over 2,000 laws that criminalize behaviors that should never have been illegal in the first place, and we've struck from the law books all 2,000 of them. In the past year alone, we've identified over 7,500 structural factors behind nearly 10,000 crimes and have solved nearly 5,000 of those structural factors entirely, with partial work done on the rest. And I know only solving 5,000 out of 7,500, it's not good enough. We want to do better. We want to increase that, but it's a work in progress. And this is the one that I'm most proud of. We've reduced fatalities and injuries during crisis moments by 99.98% compared to the old police department. Having de-escalation and mental health experts as our primary first responders has made a huge difference. It never really made sense to send in people who are primarily trained in intimidation and using weapons and violence in order to assert dominance. That doesn't help most of the time in situations like this. Though obviously our first responders are flanked by bodyguards who are armed with non-lethal detainment technology, who are there to play a specialized supporting role to help make sure that our officers are safe, but otherwise aren't the ones making the main decisions about how the interaction would proceed. Now, all that said, I have come to understand through an internal justice process that we at the Chalif Department have undergone that my indiscretions have caused people pain, and while I didn't mean to do it at the time, I didn't mean anything bad by it, I recognize that there was an injustice there and that I am no longer the right person to be leading our Chalif Department into its next phase. And so, unfortunately, proud as I am of my work with the department, I will be resigning in disgrace. And it is my hope that we can move on from all this unfortunate business.
Where's it hidden? Where's the milk?
I'm sorry I won't be answering any questions today.
Could you briefly explain the milk thing?
I won't be explaining the milk thing today.
Why goat's milk, sir? Grocers deserve to know the truth. Is the milk on our shelves?
Please read the report, the full report on the incident when it comes out, if you want any more details.
Are there co-conspirators?
Thank you and good night. We've been talking a bit about a utopian justice system this episode, getting some glimpses of what that might look like. I don't think you can lay out a full blueprint for every aspect of what a system like that would be because, you have to kind of respond to the needs of the moment and build it up based on the experiences of the people living in it and having it responsive to change. But I think there are, general principles, a general direction that we want to head in order to, make a justice system that isn't just responding to harm with more harm, but is actually actively trying to heal harm and prevent future harm.
Yeah, I think a utopian justice system does need to take a holistic approach to justice and not just be concerned with remedying harms, people assaulting one another or whatever, although that's part of it, but also remedying deep harms, systemic harms in society, injustices that are encoded in the historical place that our society is developing out of. An ideal justice system shouldn't be going around trying to punish bad guys and calling it a day. It should be trying to repair harm where it's been created, prevent people who have caused harm from harming again, even going so far as to restrict some of their freedoms that directly relate to that harm. So, for example, taking away the driver's license of someone who runs over someone with their car. Very proportionate. But we have to also go deeper and look at environmental justice. We have to look at inequality. We have to look at the history of patriarchy, the history of colonialism. And we need a justice system that undoes these things, that takes steps to address injustices of all kinds, but also takes steps to prevent the conditions that lead to people harming one another.
Totally. Yeah, I think a holistic approach, you kind of have the pre-existing conditions. You want to look at like what is causing people to act in antisocial ways. Big parts of that is poverty, people who are desperate, people who need to steal things for functional reasons, stealing to gain resources, caring for their children, making sure that people have supportive environments to grow up in, helping people deal with things like adverse childhood experiences, providing mental health care to people, providing education to people on things like history, sexism, racism, ableism, queerphobia, fostering empathy and emotional intelligence, environmental justice, all of that stuff, I think, is like the prevention part. And then like during crisis moments, you want to have teams of people who are trained not to shoot first and ask questions later, but actual mental health experts, de-escalation experts, people who are trained to offer care because police are not trained to offer care. And yeah, like these care workers might need armed bodyguards to help keep them safe. But these crisis moments shouldn't be dealt with by police. Police are terrible. We need people who know how to care in these situations. And then, yeah, in the aftermath, you want to have accountability for people who did things wrong. You want to have healing. You want to have amends making. And you want to do what is necessary to ensure that harms can't be repeated, whether that's through detainment or through understanding the root of the behavior and helping them alter their circumstances or their approach to things so that we can be relatively certain that they're not going to be doing those things again. That's kind of my outline of general principles for a justice system.
Yeah, it's something I would add to that is that understanding that humans have this urge, this punitive urge for revenge and retribution, and without judging that as an individual feeling, which makes a lot of sense if something horrible happens to you, to externalize that and wanting to get back at the people who've harmed you. But the justice system as an institution has a moral requirement to have a higher level of benevolence than like base human guttural instincts. And the institution of the justice system should be actively tempering the human urge to get revenge and be focused, laser focused on two things in particular when it comes to remedying harm. It's repairing the harm, and secondly, preventing that harm from happening again. Everything else, if someone feels punished or there's a sense of retribution that occurs from those types of interventions, it should be an incidental thing. It's not the basis of it. We don't want to be rooted in that feeling when we're making decisions about how institutions treat people. It's an ethical thing, even for people who are guilty, but there's also the case of like a large amount of non-guilty people find their way into the justice system and end up getting punished for things that they didn't actually do. But even for the people who are guilty, I don't think there is any justification to punish people beyond preventing them from doing harm again and repairing the harm that's caused. And I think that is kind of what a system that responds to harm without creating more harm looks like.
Yeah, totally. I think that's such an important point that like everything that we set up our justice system to do, we're doing to innocent people. That doesn't just apply to the death penalty. It applies to imprisonment. It applies to fines we levy. Literally every single punishment that we dole out in society is going to catch up some innocent people in the crossfires. And I think it's important to keep that in mind because it's totally understandable why people want revenge, why people want to punish others who have done bad things. But I think the overarching principles of a justice system should be care, compassion, gentleness, benevolence, and responding to the individual needs of the moment. And yeah, a big part of that should be that I think every single person caught up in the justice system should be treated as if there's the potential that there's been a mistake and that we don't know whether they actually did what they did because, estimates are that like 1% to 5% of people in prison in the United States are innocent. So that's anywhere from like 20,000 to 100,000, over 100,000 innocent people who are dealing with some of the most brutal conditions.
Is that per year?
That's like the prison population is 2 million people. So like at any given time, that's about as many innocent people in the United States.
An interesting thing that I found while researching this episode is I looked up traditional Inuit justice systems. And there's a Canadian government website that's set up where they basically did surveys with a bunch of Inuit elders about their system of justice. And they made a kind of like a report. It's publicly available if you search some variation on those words. But one thing that stuck out to me is just interesting is that they talked about how like sort of the law of these groups was encoded not as rule books, but as stories that communities knew. And so elders who would be kind of doing the judge and jury part of wrongdoing cases, they would be using stories that everyone knew as this like ethical guidepost to help decide what sort of response to wrongdoing was required. And it made me think like that is kind of part of an ideal justice system, like part of a utopian justice system. We often talk about narrative on this show and storytelling as maybe underrated part of politics. The premise of having stories and fables and parables that reinforce the values of the justice system that exists. So like if we're talking about a utopian justice system, part of it I think might be having fables, stories that help reinforce the logic of the system. So people are willing participants. There's a narrative mythological framework that reinforces the justice system that exists. So people embrace it. So it needs to be a just justice system for me to want to say that that's a good thing. But yeah, I think it's kind of a counterintuitive thing compared to a lot of like more wonkish discussions on how to reform policy. But I think when we're talking about a utopia and we're talking about a utopian justice system, storytelling is a way to encode laws, rules, and norms in a way that everyone can understand is a really valuable tool in the toolkit.
Yeah, and I think like inevitably when you're dealing with the justice system, when you're dealing with individual incidents, there's always like interpretation required for how to apply those things. And a big part of like how that happens in practice has to do with sort of the values of the culture and the current people who are enacting the justice system. And one of the major ways that we transmit and take in values and express our values to one another is through the stories that we tell and that resonate with us and that we share with other people. And yeah, I think it is like an important part. We could probably do an episode on that at some point, but I think also like analyzing the current stories being told in our culture for some of the weird values encoded in popular things like Marvel movies and things like that, or what, you know, sometimes they do things right.
Judge Dredd.
Yeah. Oh, the way cops like identify with the Punisher, even though anyway, it doesn't matter. Like, but it
matters to their victims, but we don't have time.
That kind of critical analysis of media work can also do the work of undoing some of the more unhealthy stories that are already acting that way in our current justice system, inspiring the police and judges who are doling out the current version of justice system.
And of course, if we want real justice, then what we want to have is a directly democratic commune of communes where everyone is paid according to need, where society is organized as a great lending library, where people have a meaningful say in their day-to-day lives, where they have a meaningful say in the direction of their society, where people have free time to spend with their friends, their family, their children, to pursue hobbies and art, to try out different jobs, be a fisherman in the morning, a poet in the afternoon. And in that general context where everyone's needs are met and where there's participatory mechanisms, where people feel connected to society and we make things that shouldn't be crimes not crimes anymore, well, that's how you get a 0% crime rate, my friends. And that's what library socialism promises.
Eventually, we'll get there. We keep approaching that zero, the holy zero crime rate.
But that's all the time that we have this week.
Yeah, thank you for listening, everybody. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any thoughts on justice that you think we missed or that we said really good or really bad, let us know. You can comment on YouTube or Patreon. We always love reading feedback. Or our Discord.
Yeah, you can also comment anywhere, even places that we wouldn't read, like public forums, private Discord servers, and so on. Any commentary, whether we read it or not, is ultimately probably good for us. And thanks also to everyone who is donating to our show, our beautiful geniuses. We genuinely and literally could not do the show without you, as I'm talking into a microphone that your donations paid for, going through a mixer that your donations paid for, on a computer that your donations paid for.
You're paying my rent, you guys. You're so great. I couldn't be more grateful.
So yeah, thank you to everyone who's already doing that for us. It allows us to do the show. And if you want to support independent left-wing content that makes you think, makes you laugh, maybe even makes you angry, maybe even tickles you pink, maybe even makes you feel disgust, maybe even makes you feel quite happy, then come to patreon.com/seriouslywrong and become a Beautiful Genius member. You get access to our whole archive, including stuff that's been taken off the main feed. And bonus episodes, we do them regularly. We've got a Jordan Peterson series, a series on the Haitian Revolution, a series on liberatory information communications technology, all sorts of interesting stuff behind the paywall that keeps us alive and nourished.
You can listen to us dunk on each Atlas Shrugged movie in detail and do a sketch world version of the movies ourselves. This is a pretty fun little trilogy. If you hate Ayn Rand, which we all should.
Yeah, and also one last thing too, I want to give a shout out to, we joined a podcast media network. So we haven't actually mentioned this on the show yet, but Harbinger Media Network, which is a Canadian left-wing podcast community, we joined them. So there's lots of good shows on there. You should check them out. We'll have a link in the description to Harbinger Media Network. It's CanCon, left-wing Canadian stuff. So if you love left-wing stuff, you love Canadian stuff, and you love podcast stuff, well, Harbinger Media Network is that perfect triple Venn diagram.
It's the trifecta. It's the where the roads meet, all three of those roads. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Bye now.
I've just realized that I am wrong. She is also wrong. So is he. We are just seriously wrong.